The room was filled with a palpable tension, suffocating in its heaviness. The worn-out furniture bore witness to the years of unspoken grievances. Kenneth, my husband of 15 years, sat across from me, seemingly engrossed in the bluish glow of the television. His indifference was a familiar stab to my heart. I took a deep breath, summoning the courage to break the oppressive silence. "Kenneth, we need to talk," I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of frustration and determination. He glanced at me briefly, his eyes flickering with annoyance before returning to the screen. "What's there to talk about, Miriam?" he replied dismissively, not bothering to look my way. The condescension in his tone was a painful echo of countless conversations. "It's about us, Kenneth," I said, my words hanging in the air. "I can't go on like this. We can't go on like this." He finally turned his attention to me, his eyes narrowing. "What are you talking about? Everything's fine." "No, Kenneth, everything's not fine," I asserted, my voice gaining strength. "For years, I felt like a shadow in my own life. Your dismissiveness, your mother's constant interference, I can't take it anymore." Kenneth chuckled, a mocking sound that grated on my nerves. "You're overreacting, Miriam. Everything's always drama with you." "Is it drama, Kenneth, or is it the truth that you refuse to acknowledge?" I shot back, frustration boiling over. "I deserve more than being ignored and belittled. I deserve to live a life where I'm seen and heard." He sighed, rolling his eyes. "You're blowing things out of proportion. This is just a rough patch. We'll get through it." "No, Kenneth, this isn't a rough patch. This is the breaking point," I declared, my words hanging heavily in the air. "I can't keep living like this. I won't." Kenneth scoffed, dismissing my words as if they were inconsequential. "You're always so dramatic, Miriam. Where will you go? You're nothing without us." His words, meant to cut deep, fueled a fire within me. "I'll find that out on my own," I retorted, standing up. I refuse to be nothing for the sake of a marriage that's been nothing for too long. As I walked away from the room, leaving Kenneth in the glow of the television, I could feel the weight of my decision and the uncertain journey that lay ahead. The breaking point had arrived, and it was time to step into the unknown, away from the toxicity that had held me captive for far too long. The next morning, the echoes of our heated conversation lingered in the air as I faced the inevitable. Kenneth, my husband of 15 years, sat at the breakfast table, his eyes fixed on his phone as if the events of the previous night were inconsequential. I approached, my emotions a whirlwind of determination and fear. "Kenneth, we need to talk about this," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. He looked up briefly, a nonchalant expression on his face. "Talk about what? You're still on about that nonsense from last night?" "This is not nonsense, Kenneth," I replied, frustration bubbling to the surface. "This is about our lives, about my life. I can't continue like this." He scoffed, dismissing my concerns. "You're overreacting, Miriam. This is just a phase. Every couple goes through rough patches." "This is more than a rough patch, Kenneth. This is a fundamental issue," I asserted, trying to make him understand. "I can't live in a marriage where I'm constantly belittled and ignored." Kenneth chuckled, a condescending smirk on his face. "Where do you think you'll go, Miriam? You can't survive without me. You're nothing without us." His words, a twisted reminder of our history, cut through me. I took a deep breath, my resolve strengthening. "I'm leaving, Kenneth," I declared, looking him in the eyes. "I can't stay in a place where I'm constantly made to feel like I'm worth nothing." He glanced up from his phone, a hint of annoyance in his eyes. "You're being ridiculous. Leaving won't solve anything." "It's the only solution for me," I replied, my voice firm. "I need to find myself again, away from the toxicity that's been suffocating me." Kenneth laughed incredulously. "Find yourself? What melodrama is this, Miriam? You'll come crawling back. You can't survive on your own." "I'm not coming back, Kenneth," I asserted, standing up. "I refuse to be defined by a marriage that has long lost its meaning. I deserve more than this." As I walked away, leaving Kenneth sitting at the breakfast table, I felt a mix of fear and empowerment. The decision had been made, and the path ahead was uncertain. But in that moment, I knew I had taken the first step toward reclaiming my life. The cool evening breeze felt like a breath of fresh air as I stepped out of the house, leaving behind the suffocating atmosphere that had defined my marriage to Kenneth. The weight of my decision hung in the air, but a newfound sense of liberation enveloped me. I stood on the porch, a mix of fear and empowerment coursing through my veins. As I closed the door behind me, the familiar sound of Kenneth's voice echoed from inside. "You'll be back. You need us," he called out, his words trailing after me like a bitter gust of wind. I ignored his taunts and walked away, determined to embrace the uncertainty that lay ahead. The path was unclear, but for the first time in years, I felt a glimmer of hope. My journey towards self-discovery had begun, and with each step, I could feel the weight of the years of submission lifting off my shoulders. As I walked down the quiet neighborhood street, the familiar landmarks took on a new significance. The world outside my marital confines seemed vast and full of possibilities. The evening sun cast a warm glow on the horizon, and the distant sounds of life felt like a symphony of freedom. A familiar voice interrupted my thoughts as Lexi, Kenneth's mother, emerged from the neighboring house. "Running away, are we?" she sneered, her eyes narrowing with a blend of disdain and amusement. "I knew you didn't have the spine to handle this family." I didn't dignify her words with a response, choosing instead to keep walking. Lexi's manipulative tactics were as familiar as the air I breathed, and I was determined not to let her toxic presence linger any longer. As I reached the end of the street, I could still hear Kenneth's voice carried by the wind. "You'll be back. You can't survive without me," he shouted, the desperation in his tone echoing my newfound strength. "I'll manage," I whispered to myself, reinforcing my commitment to this journey of self-discovery. The small apartment I had found awaited me, a humble haven where I could breathe and think without judgment. As the door to my new sanctuary closed behind me, I felt a sense of empowerment and relief. The cool evening breeze outside had transformed into a balm for my suffocated soul, and for the first time in years, I was free from the chains that had bound me to an unfulfilling life. The journey had just begun, and I was ready to reclaim the essence of who I was. The small apartment, though modest, felt like a sanctuary where I could finally breathe without the weight of judgment and manipulation. As I stepped inside, the echoes of the past began to fade, replaced by a sense of quietude and the promise of a new beginning. The walls, adorned with neutral colors, provided a blank canvas for the life I was determined to rebuild. I moved through the rooms, each step a deliberate act of reclaiming a space that was mine alone. The simplicity of the furnishings carried a profound meaning, a stark contrast to the cluttered existence I had left behind. A few days passed, and as I settled into my new routine, the barrage of calls and messages from Kenneth and Lexi became incessant. Their voices fluctuated between pleading and threats, a desperate attempt to maintain control over the narrative of my life. One evening, as I unpacked the few belongings I had taken with me, Lexi's voice pierced through the silence. "You think you can just run away, Miriam? You're nothing without us. Mark my words, you'll regret this," she spat, the venom in her tone a testament to her frustration at losing the grip she once had. I didn't respond. Instead, I focused on creating a space that reflected my newfound independence. The apartment became more than walls and furniture. It became a symbol of my strength and resilience. A place where I could heal and rediscover the parts of myself that had been buried under years of submission. The weeks unfolded with a rhythm of solitude and self-discovery. My co-workers at the local library, where I had worked part-time for years, provided a supportive network. They had witnessed the gradual erosion of my spirit and were now witnesses to my rebirth. One day, as I stepped out of my apartment, I encountered a neighbor who had heard whispers about my separation. "You're doing what's right for you, Miriam," she said, offering a reassuring smile. "It takes courage to break free from toxic relationships." Encouraged by the support around me, I continued to forge my path. The apartment, though small, became a haven where I could find solace and strength. It was in this space that I reflected on the past 30 years with Kenneth, a marriage that had disintegrated into a shadow of what it could have been. As I embraced the solitude of my new sanctuary, I knew that the journey ahead was both challenging and liberating. The small apartment had become a metaphorical cocoon, allowing me to undergo a transformation that would lead to the emergence of a stronger, more resilient version of myself. The past was behind me, and the future, though uncertain, held the promise of freedom and self-discovery. The decision to seek legal independence was a crucial step in my journey toward reclaiming my life. Armed with determination, I consulted with a lawyer to navigate the complexities of separating our finances from Kenneth's. The legal proceedings became a battleground where the truth about Kenneth's financial mismanagement and Lexi's gambling habit would be exposed. In the lawyer's office, as we discussed the process, I felt a mixture of anxiety and empowerment. The lawyer, a calm and experienced presence, reassured me. "You have a strong case, Miriam. It's time to protect yourself and secure what's rightfully yours." The first legal document, outlining the separation of our finances, was met with resistance from Kenneth. Over the phone, his voice laced with anger, he demanded, "What do you think you're doing, Miriam? This is ridiculous." "I'm protecting myself, Kenneth," I replied, my voice calm but firm. "Something I should have done years ago." Lexi's reaction was even more dramatic. When she learned about the legal proceedings, her screeching voice filled the air. "You ungrateful wretch! After everything we've done for you," she exclaimed, her manipulative tactics in full force. "I'm doing what's necessary for my well-being, Lexi," I responded, unmoved by her theatrics. The years of submission were over, and I was now playing by my own rules. The weeks following the legal steps were tumultuous. Kenneth and Lexi's true natures were fully exposed in their anger. I received countless calls, each more venomous than the last. Kenneth, in a moment of desperation, hissed, "You think you're clever, Miriam. You're nothing without me. You'll come crawling back." "I won't, Kenneth. I'm done being your puppet," I replied, my newfound strength bolstering my words. Lexi, attempting to guilt-trip me, was even more vitriolic. "You've ruined our family. After everything, you turn your back on us," she screeched, her attempts to manipulate the narrative failing. "There was no family to ruin, Lexi. It was an illusion," I shot back, refusing to be swayed by her emotional manipulation. The court proceedings were grueling, but I stood my ground. With the help of my lawyer, I exposed the financial instability that was their weakest point. The truth about Lexi's gambling debts and Kenneth's mismanagement of our finances came to light. In the courtroom, as the judge ruled in my favor, granting me a significant portion of our assets, I felt a sense of vindication. It was more than a legal victory, it was a moral one. I walked out of the courtroom with my head held high, knowing that I had stood up for myself and secured a future free from the shadows of the past. As the legal proceedings concluded, Kenneth and Lexi's defeat was evident in their eyes. The financial independence I had fought for marked not only a legal triumph, but also a symbol of my resilience. The chains of the past were breaking, and I was ready for whatever came next in my journey of reclaiming my life. With the court ruling in my favor and the legal steps taken, the consequences of their actions began to unfold in Kenneth and Lexi's lives. The once secure world they had built started to crumble, revealing the true extent of the damage caused by years of manipulation and deceit. Kenneth's friends, who had once been pillars of his social standing, began to distance themselves. Their once tightly knit circle now viewed him with suspicion, unwilling to associate with a man caught in the scandal of financial mismanagement. One of his closest friends, during a rare face-to-face encounter, expressed his unease, saying, "Kenneth, I can't be associated with this. You've got a lot to answer for. You're all turning your backs on me," Kenneth exclaimed, his desperation evident in his voice. "I'll bounce back, just watch." But the reality was different. His career, once pristine, suffered irreparably. The connections that had fueled his success were now reluctant to associate with someone whose reputation was tarnished. Kenneth lamented, "You've ruined me, Miriam. I had everything, and now it's all gone." "You ruined yourself, Kenneth." "I just exposed the truth," I replied, the weight of my words echoing in the aftermath of the courtroom victory. Lexi faced a similar fate in her social circles. The community, once a source of her pride, began to distance themselves as the truth about her gambling addiction and manipulation spread. In a chance encounter at the grocery store, she accused me, "You've turned everyone against us, Miriam. This is war." "This family was broken long before I left, Lexi," I countered, refusing to be shaken by her attempts to shift blame. "I won't let you rewrite history." Their world continued to unravel. The house that had once been a symbol of their success was now on the market, a stark reminder of the downfall they faced. I heard from a mutual acquaintance that Kenneth had tried to find work, but his reputation preceded him. Lexi's attempt to regain some semblance of control failed, leaving her financially and socially bankrupt. As the weeks turned into months, I observed from a distance as their lives took a downward spiral. Kenneth, once proud and confident, was now a shadow of his former self. I saw him one evening, a defeated posture, hollow eyes revealing the toll of his actions. "You did this to me, Miriam," he lamented, a shadow of his former arrogant self. "No, Kenneth, you destroyed us long ago. I'm just picking up the pieces," I replied, walking away from the remnants of the life we had shared. The aftermath of the court ruling was a whirlwind, and their once stable lives continued to unravel. The victory in court was not just legal, it was a triumph of justice and self-respect. As I looked forward to the future, free from the chains of my past, I knew that the journey of reclaiming my life was not over. But with each unraveling thread in Kenneth and Lexi's lives, I felt a sense of closure and the possibility of building a new chapter filled with strength, resilience, and the promise of a brighter tomorrow. With the legal battles behind me and the echoes of their unraveling lives slowly fading, I focused on rebuilding mine. The small apartment, once a refuge from toxicity, transformed into a space where I could redefine myself and find peace. The weeks turned into months, and the ripples of my actions continued to be felt, not only in my life, but also in the lives of Kenneth and Lexi. One day, I received an unexpected visit from Alex, our son. His eyes, once clouded with concern, now held a glimmer of hope. "Mom, I just came from seeing Dad and Grandma," he began, his voice carrying a mix of emotions. "They're not doing well." I'd offered him a seat and a warm cup of tea, ready to listen. "Tell me what happened, Alex." "Dad's been let go from his job," he sighed, the weight of the revelation evident in his voice. As the following weeks unfolded, the news of Kenneth and Lexi's struggles became whispers among acquaintances. Their once impressive house, now on the market, symbolized the crumbling facade of success. Kenneth, once surrounded by loyal friends, now faced isolation as his career suffered. Lexi, whose social circle had dwindled, clung to her narrative of victimhood. "You can't do this to us, Miriam," Kenneth exclaimed over the phone one evening, desperation in his voice. "I've done nothing but take back what's mine," I replied firmly, my determination unwavering. "You should have thought about the consequences before you betrayed me." Lexi, attempting to rally family members against me, approached during a chance encounter at the grocery store. "Miriam, you're tearing this family apart," she accused, her tone accusatory. "This family was broken long before I left, Lexi," I responded, steadfast in my refusal to accept blame. "I won't let you rewrite history." I changed my phone number, severing the direct line of harassment. Volunteering at a local shelter became a source of solace, providing me with the opportunity to help others facing similar struggles. My quest for justice wasn't over though. Learning that Lexi planned to contest the court's decision, I fortified my legal defenses, prepared for any move she made. "I'll make sure you won't get away with this, Miriam," Lexi threatened through a message relayed by a relative. "I'm ready for whatever you throw my way, Lexi," I replied, my voice steady. The woman who once shied away from confrontation was now a fighter, standing up for what was rightfully hers. As the legal battle continued, Kenneth's once pristine image crumbled further, and his career suffered irreparable damage. Lexi, desperate to reclaim the money for her gambling habits, found her attempts to contest the court's decision failing miserably. Their lives, now estranged from most acquaintances, were a mere shadow of their former selves. The house that had symbolized their success was no longer theirs, and the echoes of their past misdeeds lingered in the community. As I witnessed their struggles from a distance, I felt no joy in their suffering. It was a necessary step in my journey, but it wasn't the end. Months turned into years, and I continued to build my new life with a newfound strength. One day, as I was settling into my routine, the phone rang. It was Alex. "Mom, Sarah and I are getting married, and we'd love for you to help us with the planning," he exclaimed, excitement brimming in his voice. Joy surged through me, a stark contrast to the distress and despair of the past. "That's wonderful news, Alex. Of course, I'd love to help," I replied, the happiness in my voice reflecting the triumph of resilience over adversity. Our conversation was filled with laughter and plans for the future. A few days later, while out for a walk, I encountered Lexi. She seemed smaller, diminished somehow. Our eyes met, and there was a brief flicker of something, perhaps regret. "Miriam, you've destroyed us," she accused. "No, Lexi, you destroyed yourselves," I replied, walking away without giving her the satisfaction of seeing me upset. The day of the wedding arrived. A beautiful ceremony filled with laughter and tears of joy. Watching Alex and Sarah, so full of love and promise, I felt a sense of accomplishment. In my toast, I said, "Life brings many challenges, but it's how we face them that defines us." Today, we celebrate love, resilience, and new beginnings. As the evening drew to a close, I looked around at the happy faces, feeling content. The end of my marriage was not the end of my story. It was the beginning of a new chapter where I was the author of my own life. In this chapter, I found happiness, peace, and a sense of self that no one could ever take away.